Good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday morning to you. Welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I'm the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. And we are continuing our study of the Olivet Discourse. We've been focused on the motif, and the parable of the absent master in Matthew chapter 25, 14 and following. And I've been sharing with you how every New Testament passage that deals with the promise of the coming of the Lord is in reality a promise of the return of the absent master. And, once we grasp this, all of a sudden vistas open up for understanding the entire narrative of eschatology. Now, let me remind you of this connection. Just have to excuse me and my problem with my voice. Okay. In Matthew 25, 1 to 13, we have the promise of the coming of the bridegroom. We spent a good long while on that. Segueing directly from the prophecy of the coming of the bridegroom is the prophecy, the parable of the absent master. Now, I want to suggest to you that this is no accident on the part of Jesus. I want to suggest to you that Jesus was following the Old Testament pattern, the Old Testament narrative, if you please, in regard to the return of the absent master for the time of the wedding. Okay? Now, I know that Matthew chapter 25, 1 to 13 does not say, well, the bridegroom that had been absent returned. Well, it doesn't have to express it in those very specific words, right? Because that would have been understood. The bridegroom was absent, and now he comes. But here's the reality of it. Here's the Old Testament background of that. Let's keep in mind, and this is a bit of a reiteration of what I shared with you when we were studying Matthew 25, 1 to 13. And that is that the coming of the bridegroom. Look, Jesus didn't just make up this imagery out of whole cloth. This comes directly from Old Covenant Israel's promise. Very, very quickly, keep in mind that Yahweh was married to Old Covenant Israel. But you have the separation, the division of the kingdom. The 10 northern tribes went off. They apostatized. They worshiped other gods. They set up their own temple system. They set up their own place of worship, on and on. They committed spiritual adultery. As a result of that, Yahweh divorced the 10 northern tribes. But in Hosea, and as I've shared with you, the book of Hosea is one of the most poignant, one of the most beautiful, all at the same time being so sad books in the entire Old Testament. As a result of Israel's sin, Yahweh said this in Hosea chapter 5. I'm going to begin reading with verse 13. When Ephraim saw her sickness and Judah saw his wound, then Ephraim sent to Assyria and sent to King Jareb, yet he cannot cure you, nor heal you of your wound. For I, this is Yahweh speaking, will be like a lion to Ephraim, like a young lion to the house of Judah. I, even I, will tear them and go away. I will take them away, and no one will rescue them. I will return to my place until they acknowledge their offense. Then they will seek my face. In their affliction, they will earnestly seek me. Do you see the departure of the groom, of the husband? But what is the promise? The promise was that when Israel, if and when Israel would repent, which of course is based upon Deuteronomy chapter 30, in which Yahweh said, if this people violates my law, I will carry them off into the far countries. But if, while they are there in those far countries, if they will repent and they will return to me and obey the law of Moses, then I will bring them back and I will plant them in this land. That's exactly what's being echoed here in Hosea chapter 5. The point being, here you have the promise of the departure, the divorce of the groom. And the promise, I've got a gnat, killed him. and the promise of the return of the groom for the wedding. Matthew chapter 25, you have the coming of the bridegroom. Well, what's he coming for? He's coming for the wedding, obviously. Chapter 25, 14 and following, you have that very return of the absent master in judgment to gather his servants and to take account of what they had done. Listen, there is no disparity. There is no break. There is a thematic unity here between the absence of the bridegroom who had gone away but is now returning for the wedding. N.T. Wright realizes and teaches that what you have in Matthew chapter 25, 1 to 13, is Jesus setting forth the fulfillment of Hosea and the promise of the bridegroom and the promise of Yahweh to return and to remarry Israel. You see, folks, we have to keep in mind, as I have said repeatedly in this entire series of now 470 some videos on the Olivet Discourse, I have shared with you, I have emphasized, I have driven home the point. We must understand the Olivet Discourse in its historical and its theological and its prophetic context. Jesus was absolutely not divorcing his discussion of either the bridegroom or the absent master from its Old Testament prophetic context, or from its first century historical context. He was honoring. You see, in effect, what we are seeing here is what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5, 17 and 18. Do not think that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I did not come to destroy, but to fulfill. And thus, echoing one of the greatest promises of the Old Testament, that is, that Yahweh in the last days would return and gather Israel to him. Yahweh would return and remarry Israel. Yahweh would return and judge All of those motifs are focused in and embedded in the absent master motif. And thus, when we come to the New Testament, and from Matthew onward, from Mark onward, from the time Jesus spoke all of his parables, and over spoke of the return of the absent master, are we to suppose, I've already answered the question, but are we to suppose that Jesus was ignoring all of those Old Testament prophecies about how he had left? About how he had abandoned Israel? Look, even in the book of Malachi, which is an incredible book containing 7 debates between Yahweh and Israel, specifically Judah. Even though they had returned to the land, even though they had rebuilt the temple, yet they were in full-blown apostasy again. And Yahweh engaged in 7 debates with them. And Malachi chapter 3 and verse 7 is another poignant text that points us to the absent master motif. How so? The Lord said to Judah and Jerusalem, return to me. Well, what does that mean? That means that Judah was departing from the covenant. Return to me, watch this, and I will return to you. Oh Lord, where have you been? Well, there was no Shekinah glory on that rebuilt temple. Yahweh was not with them in the full covenantal blessing sense. He had indeed blessed them to return them. He had indeed blessed them to rebuild the temple. But now they've apostatized. He was not with them. And so I ask you once again, are we to come to Matthew chapter 25, 1 to 13, and to ignore that prophetic background, that historical background, and say, oh, well, you know what, in Matthew 25, in 1 to 13, the parable of the wedding and the bridegroom, and in Matthew 25, 14 and following, we got something totally different. Has nothing to do with Israel and Yahweh's departure from her in the Old Testament, has nothing whatsoever to do with the coming of the bridegroom, has nothing whatsoever to the return to Israel in covenant renewal. No, we're supposed to believe this is Christ coming at the end of the new covenant age. This is Christ coming at the so-called end of time. This has nothing to do with God fulfilling his promises to Israel. Folks, I think that is an absolutely untenable position. And when we see the return of the absent master in light of Hosea, in light of Malachi, in light of Isaiah chapter 62, and a host of passages, when we see this motif from there, we are absolutely forced to conclude it was fulfilled in the first century because Jesus said, speaking of the fall of Jerusalem, that occurred in AD 70, these be the days of vengeance, in which all things that are written must be fulfilled. And let us not forget that in that event, Jesus said, they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. Matthew 24. Verse 31, and it was to be in that generation. Verse 34. Okay, out of time. Listen, do not forget, the rest of this month, July 2021, U.S. orders only, all the way through the month of August 2021, all book orders of $25 or more will receive a 15% discount plus free shipping. So go to my website, donkpreston.com, BibleProphecy.com, and you know, I've recommended that you get these 2 books. Elijah has come and Torah to tell us the end of the law, the passing of the law of Moses. Remember, if you order these 2 books, you're going to get a 15% discount plus free shipping. So take advantage of that. Elijah has come and the end of the law of Moses. Okay, out of time for today. Thank you so much. And of course, we've got more on the flip side.